In the world of gacha games, comparing titles is normal. Attacking the competition, that has been happening since I was a baby. And at this point, it is expected. It is just part of the culture. But with Wuthering Waves, something feels off. If you look closely at the backlash this game gets, it doesn't feel like a natural rivalry. It feels forced. Usually when people hate a game, it is because the game is broken or the gameplay is boring. But here, we are seeing people invent problems that don't exist. They are editing screenshots to make the art look worse. They are writing essays pretending to be offended by standard Japanese words. They are even stealing YouTube footage to fake technical issues. When you have to work this hard to find a reason to hate a video game, you are not offering criticism, you are putting on a performance. So why is there such a desperate, coordinated effort to paint this game as a disaster? Here is the reality. Wuthering Waves had a rough start, but it fixed its problems. The combat is deep, the movement is smooth, the developers are responsive, and that is exactly the problem. The hate isn't growing because the game failed. It is growing because the game succeeded. And for a specific group of people, that success is terrifying. So today, we are not just looking at the drama, we are going to look at why this hate campaign feels so manufactured and the insecurity driving it. If you appreciate these kinds of deep dives into gaming psychology, consider subscribing and hitting the like button. It really helps the channel out. Now let's talk about it, right? To understand this war, we have to look at the foundation. And let's be honest, the foundation was shaky. There is a psychological concept called the primacy effect. Basically, it means the first thing you learn about something sticks with you the longest. And for a lot of people, their first impressions of Wuthering Waves was, let's call it, rough. You had bugs, you had lag, and you had a story that loved to dump 3 dictionaries worth of terms on you in the first hour. It wasn't great. But here's the thing about reality. It changes. Since launch, the game has improved at a speed that is, frankly, terrifying for the industry. The story completely changed. The movement got smoother. We even got flight now. And the animations went from good to movie quality. But here's the question, right? If the game is fixed, as I said, why is the hate getting louder? The answer isn't in the code. It is in the psychology. It is called the sunk cost fallacy. Have you heard of that before? Imagine you have spent 5 years building a house. You pour thousands of dollars into it, right? You have spent every day working on it, and then someone builds a modern, sleeker house right across the street in 6 months. And it has air conditioning. You have 2 choices. You can admit the new house has some cool features yours doesn't, or you can convince yourself that the new house is actually garbage, that air conditioning is for weak people, real men would withstand the heat, and that your house is the only real house. For a lot of Genshin Impact players, this isn't just the game, it is an investment. They have logged in thousands of hours. They have spent the equivalent of a down payment on a car pulling for characters. I mean, I have heard many stories about people ruining their lives over gacha games, and this is why it hurts them so much when they see loyal players actually try the competition. You see clips of die-hard Genshin fans loading up wuwa and losing their minds because they can sprint without a stamina bar, or run up a wall, or fly without a character that is pay-gated. I mean, I watched this video and they called Wuthering Waves
Genshin on steroids.
I mean, the reaction, right? That excitement, that is a threat. It validates the deep, quiet insecurity that maybe, just maybe, they are stuck in a game that doesn't respect their time anymore. And that is a painful realization. The brain tries to protect itself from that pain. So instead of having a rational debate about mechanics or movements, the community puts up a shield. They decide that the competition must be bad, not because it is, but because it has to be. Since attacking the gameplay is a losing battle, because let's face it, the combat speaks for itself, they have to find a new battlefield. They decided to attack the game's soul. They needed a way to feel superior. They couldn't use the gameplay for that, right? So they went for the visuals. You've probably seen the meme format, right? It is usually titled, "If this character was in wuwa." They take a design from another game, usually a HoYoverse title, but it doesn't have to be, and present it as a joke. On the surface, it looks like a critique of art direction. They're saying Wuthering Waves designs are generic or gooner bait, internet slang for stuff designed solely to please gooners. But look at what this is actually doing. It establishes a class system. By painting the competitor as trashy and naked, they get to frame their own game as high art. They tell themselves, I'm not gambling on anime girls, I'm appreciating cultural lore and intricate fashion. I might be gooning, but I'm high quality gooning. Like what? It doesn't make sense. And it makes them feel sophisticated. But it is a glass house, and they're throwing out a lot of stones. Because let's be real for a second, we're talking about the same company that made billions off a character pulling a sword out of her chest. We're talking about Zenless Ground Zero, a game where the physics engine works overtime every time a character breathes. And here's the catch, and that is fine. I'm not judging it, but the hypocrisy is fascinating. When HoYoverse does it, the fans call it character empowerment or bold design. Oh, mommy. When Wuthering Waves does it, it is labeled as desperate. It hit rock bottom with a bread. Someone posted a picture of a bread roll that looked like a butt and said, bread if it was in wuwa. Like, come on, man. Sure, it's funny. It got 17,000 likes, but it proves that this isn't about art criticism anymore. It is about reduction. They are actively trying to dehumanize the work of the artist. They look at a game with incredible muscle definition and fabric technology, and they reduce it all down to just gooner beats. Because if they admit their art was technically impressive, they lose the moral high ground. They even tried to weaponize the genre itself. People started calling the game Gathering Wives. It was meant to be an insult. It was meant to say, this is just a shallow harem game for lonely people. But then a funny thing happened. The Wuthering Waves players just agreed. They started saying, hell yeah, I'm gathering wives. Because honestly, what do you think this was? It is a gacha game. The entire business model is based on parasocial relationships and collecting attractive characters with tragic backstories. Attacking a gacha game for having a harem is like walking into a casino and making fun of people for gambling. It is like the whole point. By embracing the insults, the community took the weapon away. The aesthetic war mostly failed because, at the end of the day, people like attractive characters. So if calling the game ugly or trashy didn't stop people from playing it, the haters had to move to the one place where they thought they were safe. They had to go after the gameplay. And this is where things get intellectually dishonest. You might have seen the viral argument going around, and I made a video about it too. Wuthering Waves combat isn't deep. You just memorize the enemy's moves and parry them, and that is it. And if you play action games, you probably realize how ridiculous that statement is. By that logic, Street Fighter is a shallow game. Sekiro is a shallow game. Because yes, technically you're just reacting to moves, but this reveals a fundamental confusion. These critics are confusing complexity with depth. Complexity is the how. It is the number of rules. It is the stuff in the game. It is the list of ingredients on the back of the box. How many elements are there? How many character kits, weapons, status effects? It is all the information you have to look up on a wiki. A game with high complexity is hard to learn. Keyword hard to learn, okay? Depth, on the other hand, is the why. It is the consequence of all of those rules. Do all of those moving parts actually matter? Do they lead to meaningful choices? A game with high depth is hard to master. Again, remember the keywords here. Complexity is hard to learn. Depth is hard to master. The people calling it Wuthering Waves shallow are trying to protect their ego because they want to believe that being good at navigating a menu is superior to being good at pressing buttons. Because if they admit that mechanical skill matters, they have to admit they might not have any. And then we have the cheat code proof. To prove the game was brainless, they posted a video of themselves fighting a boss. They used the max level, max investment whale character, basically a unit that cost hundreds of dollars to max out. They stood there, ate every hit, mashed one button, and beat the boss. And their caption was, see, no skill needed. And this is bad faith criticism. It is playing the game wrong on purpose to prove a point that doesn't exist. You used your wallet to bypass the gameplay and then complain that there was no gameplay. But why go to these lengths? Why lie about the difficulty? I think it goes down to envy. In Wuthering Waves, the difficulty is a dance. If you are skilled enough, you can beat almost anything. You dodge, you parry, you survive. In their main game, the difficulty has become a paywall. You have bosses with gray HP bars that literally require you to buy specific new units to defeat them efficiently. It is not a test of your skill, it is a test of your inventory. And when they see Wuthering Waves players having fun mastering a fight, it highlights how boring their own pay-to-win loop has become. So instead of demanding better from their own game, they try to convince everyone that skill is fake. But you can only lie about gameplay for so long before people realize they can just download the game and try it themselves. So when the gameplay argument fell apart, the hate shifted again. If they couldn't call the game bad, they would try to call the players cringe. So they went after the culture. And this is where things get genuinely embarrassing. Not for the game, but for the people complaining about it. Let's talk about the most recent incident. I like to call it the Senpai incident. A new student character, 𝗖cie, calls the main character Senpai. And now in the real world, and in Japanese language, Senpai just means senior. It is a title of respect you use for someone with more experience than you, right? It is about as sexual as calling someone boss or coach. But these people, they posted this clip with captions like, "Are we surprised?" and classic harem slap. When these tourists hear the word senpai, they don't hear a cultural term of respect. They hear hentai. Their entire understanding of Japanese culture comes exclusively from hentai or questionable romance anime. They projected their own dirty mind into a normal conversation. It got so ridiculous that an actual Japanese politician had to comment on the drama, basically asking, why are foreigners confused by a normal word? When you are getting fat fact-checked by the Japanese government, you probably lost the plot. They did the exact same thing with the voice acting. There was a viral post with thousands of likes calling the voice acting abysmal. And the proof? A clip of the character Rachia speaking in a flat, monotone voice. Here is the context they conveniently left out. Rachia is a kudere. And for those who don't speak anime like I do, that means a character who is cold, emotionless, and usually traumatized. She is scripted to sound like that. She is supposed to sound like that, to sound empty. Critiquing a robot for sounding robotic isn't valid criticism. It is just ignorance. But in the industry, we call this clip chimping. You take a 10-second clip, strip away all the context that makes it make sense, and use it to paint a narrative that the developers are incompetent. And following this, there is an accent problem. A lot of these tourists have spent the last 5 years playing HoYoverse games, right? And look, Hoyo dubs are fine, but they're very Hollywood. It is the generic American standard, at least until recently when they started to hire voice actors from EU. But Wuthering Waves tries to be different. They use European accents to match the different regions of the world. But because the critics' ears are so conditioned to that American standard, they hear the accent in Wuthering Waves and immediately call it bad or forced. They are framing a stylistic choice, diversity, as a failure. But honestly, up to this point, you could argue that this was just bias. Maybe they really are just culturally illiterate. Maybe they just have bad takes. We could almost forgive it, right? But what happened next wasn't an opinion. It wasn't a bad take. It was active, malicious sabotage. This is where we cross a line. We stop dealing with opinions and start dealing with lies. The trigger for this was the Game Awards, specifically Wuthering Waves getting nominated for Mobile Game of the Year. And now in the real world, this is just a nomination. But in the narrative these critics have built, this is a disaster.
Massive day for the unemployed.
Remember, their entire identity relies on the idea that Wuthering Waves is a dead game or a flop. If the industry validates it with an award, that narrative collapses. So they had to destroy the game's reputation before the trophies were handed out. There is a post blowing up on Twitter claiming that the game was unplayable on mobile. It showed footage where the game looked like it was running on a PlayStation 2. There is no NPCs, blurry textures, jagged edges, and the caption laughed at the idea that this broken mess could be the game of the year. And people believed it at first. I mean, why wouldn't they? If you haven't played the game, that video is damning. But then the community notes arrived. It turns out the person who posted that didn't record their own gameplay. They didn't pull out their phone and show us how it ran. Instead, they went to YouTube. They searched for a guide specifically titled Best Lowest Graphic Settings. They downloaded a video of someone intentionally turning every setting down to the absolute minimum, likely to run the game on a 10-year-old device, and they presented that as the default experience. I mean, think about that level of desperation that requires. The game runs fine on any modern phone over $300. It is optimized. We know this. They know this. But because the facts didn't support their hates, they had to manufacture a lie. They had to frame a low specs guide as a broken game showcase. Like, this is literally sabotage. It is a calculated attempt to trick potential new players into thinking the game is a scam, so they never even download it. When you have to fake evidence to prove a point, you have already lost the argument. You aren't a critic anymore. You are just a liar. And that brings us to the final question. Why? Why go this far over a video game? So if you step back and look at this whole mess from a distance, it starts to look like a pattern. It actually reminds me of that famous Narcissus prayer, but adapted for gaming tribes. It goes like this, right? First, they said the game wasn't good. It was just hype. And if it was good, they said the art was trashy gooner beats. And then if the art was fine, they said the combat was brainless. Just parry, bro. And if the combat was actually deep, they said the culture was cringe, freaking out over the word senpai. And when all of that failed, they just lied. They faked the footage. This constant shifting of the goalpost tells us the truth. This entire ecosystem of hate isn't actually about Wuthering Waves. It is a massive collective defense mechanism, like a psychological trick your brain plays to protect your ego from getting hurt. These communities have built their entire identity around the idea that their game is the best, the king. But they can feel that the king is stagnating. They can feel that the competition is innovating, doing things they wish their game would do. But instead of asking their own developers to do better, they try to drag the competition down to their level. They realized they couldn't rise to the standard Wuthering Waves set for combat and movement, so their only option was to convince everyone that the standard didn't exist. So next time you see a hate post like this, take a second, peel back the layers, and usually you won't find a real critique underneath. You'll just find insecurity. And that leaves me with a question I want to ask you guys. At what point does simply liking a game turn into this? When does brand loyalty cross the line into organized reality denial? And have you seen these patterns play out in other gaming communities? Of course you did. But let me know what you think in the comments below. That is all from me, 𝗖cie𝗽𝗆𝗆, and I will see you in the next one. Cheers!